Hello, welcome to the Choosing a Graduate School in 5 Easy Steps webinar. My name is Andrea Stanfield, and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. This webinar will be presented by Hillary Stahl. Before we start the presentation, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. On the right side of the screen, you will see the attendee control panel, and on the left is the webinar viewer window. This viewer window will display the presenter screen when the webinar begins. The control panel can be minimized or expanded by clicking on the horizontal double arrow button in the upper left corner. Minimizing the panel allows a better view of the presentation. Take a moment to practice. There are a few features of the control panel that the attendees should know. First, be familiar with the Raise Your Hand button. This button is located along the left side of the control panel. It allows you to virtually raise your hand if you have a question or if you want to respond to a question being asked by the presenter. Click this button and raise your hand now. Clicking again will lower your hand. Okay, I'm seeing hands now. At first I wasn't. Okay, thanks. In the attendee pane on the organizer control panel, you have the option to lower a raised hand. Another important feature of the control panel is the questions pane. To submit a question, type it into the question box. These may be questions related to the presentation or technical questions related to the GoToWebinar system. You may also be asked by the presenter to type your ideas or responses here as part of an exercise during the webinar. Please send a quick note in your questions pane now telling us where you are logging in from. Okay, we have someone from Denver. Oh, Tallahassee. I went to Florida State. Washington, University of Nebraska, LA. Okay, we've got people from all over. Questions may be submitted at any time. These will be monitored and we will try to respond quickly if we see something that shouldn't wait until the Q&A period, such as making a clarification. During the webinar, you may be asked to respond to a polling question or survey. Please take the time to participate as your input and ideas are valuable to the group. Be sure to stay attentive and to interact as much as possible during this webinar. The quality of your experience depends on your attention and participation. Try to avoid the distractions of responding to email, checking Facebook, instant messaging, or working on other tasks at your computer. If you need to step away for a moment, do not close the GoToWebinar window, as you will be required to log in again if you wish to rejoin the session. If you experience problems with the audio, one possible solution is to use the conference call number and listen to the presentation using your phone. Click the Use Telephone option in the audio pane for your control panel to view the conference call number. The webinar is being recorded and the online archive will be available to view on the CAPA website in approximately 2 weeks. Are there any questions? Okay, I'm going to turn things over to Hillary now.
Okay, hi everybody. Like Andrea said, my name is Hillary Stahl, and I'm the Education Program Coordinator for Kappa Kappa Gamma Fraternity. I just wanted to take a quick minute and thank you for joining me on tonight's webinar. I'm super excited to be here with you tonight. This is my first official webinar as a member of the fraternity staff, so it's definitely an exciting time for me as well. I know that as you are sitting here talking, we are going to have a ton of grad school questions, and that's completely fine. So I'm planning on doing about 30 minutes or so of information, and then I'll leave plenty of time at the end for any of you to ask any questions. Just so that you have a little bit of background for me, I did attend graduate school. I recently graduated in spring of 2015 from Ohio University. So I've been in your shoes with trying to pick a graduate school, and I've been in those shoes recently. So trust me, while I'm not envious at all, we can definitely get through this with the proper guidance, and we can help you choose the best school and also stay positive while doing it. So just before I get started, I just want to make sure the only thing on my screen you can see is the PowerPoint presentation. Is that correct? Go ahead and raise your hand if that's what you see. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So now you should see a 5 keys to choosing graduate school. If you don't, please type in the questions or the chat box so that we know. But the 5 keys to choosing graduate school are going to be really important when we're going through this webinar. And they're always going to be the 5 characteristics that we're going to have you keep in mind when you're choosing the graduate school. So location, cost, program, culture, and fit. And I know a lot of you are thinking that there are so many more things to consider when you're talking about choosing a graduate school, but almost all of these considerations that you're thinking about are going to fit into one of these 5 categories. So before you even get started with how to choose a graduate school, you need to make a list of negotiables and non-negotiables, just as if you were doing that for a job or a big life decision that you're going to have to make. And stick to that list. So if you say that you want to be in your home state, stick to that list. That's a non-negotiable thing for you. So don't start choosing or looking at graduate schools that are outside of that state. So start to pick those things. If there are things that are negotiable to you, don't put them on the non-negotiable list. I know that seems pretty redundant per se, but that's something that a lot of people will say, hey, you know, I'm okay with it, but I would much prefer it. Then put that on your non-negotiable list. And then don't compromise. Once you have that non-negotiable list, that's what you set out when you were first starting your graduate school search and knowing that you wanted out of your graduate school. So if you think every school that you've looked at only checks 9 of the 10 boxes, then you're not looking at the right schools. It is a huge decision, and it's definitely life-altering, so we want to make sure that you're making the right decision. So again, if you take nothing away from this webinar, the 5 things that you should for sure make sure that you have written down are location, cost, program, culture, and fit. So before we dive into those, we're going to check out the timeline really quick. And it's really important to understand the steps before actually choosing the school, because you can't just say overnight, oh, I'm going to go to Ohio State and I'm going to start graduate school tomorrow. It's essentially, this timeline is more so your planning time to get yourself ready so that you are ready to go when it comes to choosing and picking the appropriate school for you. So when talking timeline, it's really important to recognize that this is not a process that's going to happen overnight, like I just said. You really need to plan ahead of time, and you need to make sure that you're in the right place in your life to begin this process. You should ask yourself if you can devote 2+ years to being a student again, because that's what's going to more than likely be facing you. And can you balance your personal life, your academic life, and your potential professional life? A lot of people will be balancing multiple roles. And so understanding that is going to be really important. And making sure that you can determine these answers before beginning your search is also going to be really important. I'm sorry, I saw a question, but I think we're okay right now. So if you're anticipating starting graduate school in the fall of 2017, you should begin researching your graduate school options in the fall of 2015. I know, you heard me, that's crazy. It's 2 years ahead of time from when you actually want to start classes, but that's the reality. Your first year is going to be spent more so preparing and researching and then determining that non-negotiable list that I previously mentioned in the slide before. And then after you have that list, you really should start to look at some different graduate schools in the country that meet those needs. So it would be also wise to really determine the admission standards of those schools. So once you've narrowed down, hey, maybe these are some schools that I'd like to look at, dig down deep and say, do I even meet the requirements in order to get to the school? Or is this a school that I have the requirements far and above, and I don't necessarily think that this would be a challenging program for me to get into? So that's going to be really important. The other thing is to determine if you need to have classes completed before beginning your graduate program. So give yourself enough time to take additional courses should you need them before applying. For some programs, especially anything in the medical field, they may ask that you take certain science or math courses that as your undergrad you may not have had to take. So double check and make sure that you have met those requirements in order to be admitted to the school. And then others are going to require certain tests for you to take. So some graduate schools are getting a little bit more lenient and not making you take a standardized test, but others are going to make you take that standardized test. So whether it's the GRE, the GMAT, the LSAT, the MCAT, the PCAT, whatever it may be, you need to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time for that. And honestly, those tests are pretty expensive and they can't be taken right away. So you need to give yourself enough time to study and prepare for those, as well as register for the test. And then once you've done that, that's all going to be within your first year of research. And then you're really going to spend another year putting together your applications, any of your recommendation letters, any essays that they may ask for, personal statements, as well as interviewing for the graduate school. Most graduate schools are liking applications to be finalized by December 1st with the anticipated start date of fall of the following year. So if you're applying for graduate school right now, you would be applying for fall 2016 admissions. Some applications can take weeks or even months to complete. It depends on how extensive they are and whether or not you meet all the requirements on the application when you're first going to complete it. So it is really not an overnight process. So try and not throw them together because they're expensive and they're not something that you just want to throw together and hand in, because this is going to be, like I said, a life-altering decision. You need to treat it as one. And then also be careful of the application deadlines. The standard may be December 1st, but that doesn't mean that all schools adhere to the standard. I know my graduate program was willing to take applications until January the 15th, but another graduate program that I had applied to was only willing to take them until November the 25th. So make sure that you've done that research ahead of time as well, because you don't want to miss the opportunity to apply to a school that is hitting those negotiable and non-negotiable lists. So then after you apply, you're normally going to hear within a few months if you were accepted or if you were offered an interview. It depends on the program and it depends on what your career path is going to be with how they are going to decide admission standards. So some schools are also going to graduate assistantships, TAs, RAs, etc. So if you have that, you may also have to interview for those positions. And again, that doesn't happen overnight either. So if you are applying and deadline is December 1st, you may not hear until middle to end of January whether or not you were even accepted for an interview, and then interview middle February to not find out until March or April. So it does take a while, so just be patient, and decisions are going to follow all of that. So make sure that as you are putting together this timeline, you're being conscious of the dates that you're going to need to adhere to. Now, we've talked about the application piece. We've talked about what to do within the application. We've talked about more so about the timeline. Now we need to talk about the number of applications you should submit in order to give yourself the best chance of attending graduate school. It's really not ideal for you to be applying to a ton of schools. I know a lot of you may be thinking like, oh my gosh, if I have to go next year, I need to apply to 20 schools. That way I'm guaranteed that I get into at least one. That's not what we want you to do. It's expensive and it's going to be a lot of money wasted. These applications are not cheap, and most of the time you cannot get them to waive them. So dependent upon your school, whether it's graduate school or professional school, it just depends, but it could be $50 for the application fee or $250 for the application fee. So definitely be mindful of that, and also make sure that you have the funds in order to apply as well as take the tests and do all of that within the same period of time. So that we're not wasting money, after you've done your research and you've considered all of the admission standards and you've looked at the 5 characteristics that we talked about at the very, very beginning, location, cost, program, culture, and fit, you should pick 5 schools to apply to. No more than 5 schools. Of those 5, 2 of the schools should be what we refer to as safety schools. So these schools would be something that you are pretty positive you're going to get into the school already. You've met the admission standards. It's a pretty simple program to get into. And so you think, okay, done deal, I'm sure I can get in. then 2 of the schools should be schools that you think you have a fighting chance. Maybe a little bit more of a reach school, but not out all the way in left field that you would need to get struck by lightning in order to get into. So definitely schools that they're going to challenge you, but you still have a chance. And then you're going to pick that one school, which is your reach school, that dream school that you absolutely would love to attend, but there's really no chance of you ever getting in unless, I don't know, the apocalypse happens and we see a double rainbow and there are pots of gold at the bottom of it. So make sure that you're really adhering to that. And while you may think that reach school is something of a waste of money, keep in mind that by doing that, and if you do potentially get in, you may have just opened your doors to an excellent program. So that's why we tell you just to choose one. So that dream school, identify it and only apply to one of them. 2 of them are going to be within reach, and 2 of them should be, I know I can get in, there should be no questions. Again, graduate school application.
Hillary?
Can everybody hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, that was weird. I somehow lost connection. If I do it again, don't sign off. I will sign back in, but it said that it reestablished my connection. Okay, so
Hillary,
picking off where we start. What?
it's Andrea. Someone is asking if you changed the slide. I'm not sure if.
I have not changed the slide yet. We're still on timeline.
Okay. All right. And then I don't know if you want to put the slides in presentation mode or not.
Or are they not?
No, we can see the sidebar.
Okay.
Thanks.
So can you see it now? Andrea, can you see the sidebar now?
Yeah, it seems like I wonder if something is wrong because someone is asking which. Is it possible the slides aren't showing?
I mean, possibly. Hang on.
Are you on the timeline slide?
Okay, can you see it now? It's the timeline slide.
Yeah, that's it. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Can you still see my control panel, my GoToWebinar control panel?
Yes.
Okay, that's weird. All right, we'll go with it.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, so where I was with this grad school application, another really important key piece to remember, and this is, again, not necessarily in choosing a graduate school, but just making sure that you do have your options of choice. Your social media needs to be spectacular. If you have anything inappropriate, get rid of it. Make sure your account is as private as possible so that when another school wants to try and find you on social media, they can't, or they can only find the things that you want them to find. Once it's put out there, it's out there. So make sure that your social media is really cleaned up. Professional programs are beginning to not only look at your profiles, but also the profiles of friends on your group that have, or on your pages that have recently commented. And if they get on your friends that have recently commented on your page and see something inappropriate, they flag you as a possible person not to admit into the program. So be sure that you're really monitoring your social media and that you're deleting anything that does not represent you in a professional and positive way, because you definitely don't want social media to be the reason why you are not getting into graduate school. So now you all should see the location screen. Andrea, can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So when you're determining where you want to be, location is going to be a huge determination. Oftentimes people are going to choose location based upon their comfort zone. So if somebody's from Ohio, they may want to stay in the Midwest. But when picking a location, try and find a school that may be close to an outlet of support for you. Doesn't necessarily have to be an immediate family member, but it might be helpful to have somebody close to you that you know and that's that little piece of home. You also need to decide where in the country you want to be, or if you want to be out of the country. There are many programs abroad, so if that's something you want to do, go do it. There are thousands of schools, and determining your location is really a great way to begin narrowing down that list, because if you don't want to be on the West Coast, there may be 500 schools over there. You automatically knocked out those 500 schools because that's on your non-negotiable list of not being on the West Coast. If you're okay with going anywhere, that's totally fine too, but decide where you might prefer to be. Graduate school is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so you can be risky and you can go somewhere that you've always wanted to go, but you haven't necessarily gone before, or you can stay in the comfort zone. Those are 100% your options, but make sure to investigate them before making the decision. So investigating the type of school that, or the type of town the school is in, and what the local amenities are that are available are going to be important as well. Determining how much it's going to cost to live, eat, shop, all of those things you would normally do on a regular basis is going to be important. And when push comes to shove, anyone can do anything for a few years, but if you aren't happy in your location, you won't have the positive experience that you want out of a graduate program. So really, location is going to be key when you're deciding what graduate program you'd like to select. So cost, the fun thing of every decision. Graduate school can be pricey. That's not a shock to anybody that's on this webinar. But you need to look at it as an investment. So those that are spending the money to attend graduate school really have their career in mind, and they have a goal. They're not just doing it because they don't want college to end. Graduate school is expensive, so you need to be doing it for the right reasons. However, there really are a lot of different options to help fund a graduate degree. So a student can do the traditional take-out student loans, but those come with interest and sometimes are unmanageable if not educated properly on the loan. And so if a person is employed and is going back to school and it could benefit their current employer, that employer may be willing to reimburse the student for their tuition or provide an additional tuition assistance opportunity. So those are things to investigate before taking out a student loan. Student loans should really be your last option, because you may have some other options before that, because you don't want to have to borrow money at an interest rate if you can get money for free. The graduate school that you're applying to may also have additional tuition assistance opportunities for graduate students. Schools will and oftentimes can offer scholarships that have been earmarked for a certain program or type of student. So maybe they're looking for a student that's going to be in the College Student Personnel Program that has been an affiliated member of Kappa Kappa Gamma, and they have a scholarship because a large donor has left it before in the past. Those are opportunities to seek out. So the school may not have that particular example, but they may have other scholarships or grants as well, based upon your personal and educational history, as well as your FAFSA number. So just like undergrad, if you're looking to receive any sort of aid, including student loans, you need to fill out your FAFSA. That way they can assess your need and determine where and how much money you should be able to pay for graduate school each year. Additionally, schools should have some opportunities for graduate assistantships, teaching assistantships, research assistantships, any type of assistantship. A school more than likely is going to have a possibility for that. You also are probably going to have the opportunity I completely lost my mind, sorry. You're more than likely going to have the opportunity to interview for those if you're at a larger school. Sometimes smaller schools have those opportunities, but they may have partnerships with other bigger institutions, and you can work at the bigger institution while going to school at a private school and still get the tuition assistance. So there are definitely options to keep in consideration. When you're doing this, though, you're essentially working for the school for a stipend and free or reduced tuition rates. So this could come into play if you think that the school may be too costly. So it's something to consider. If you're going to knock it off because you say, I can't spend more than X number of dollars each year, and that school is going to be more than that, look into your funding options. The institution that you're going to apply for will have information on those programs, and you can ask about them. And if they don't, there's no problem in picking up the phone and calling and asking about that. You can call the program, but you can also call the financial aid office and just ask. However, regardless of these options, you still need to look over at the overall price tag. If you can't get any of those things, will the school costs still be manageable? So again, put that on your non-negotiable list. I can only spend X number of dollars a year in order to be financially responsible. And considering, can you still support a family or yourself while also paying tuition? Are you going to be able to pay rent if you're paying tuition? Those are important things to consider. So making sure, again, that you're in the right place in life in order to undertake this is going to be huge. And price, again, is still really important on the list of things to consider. And it may not be the first thing, but it's definitely a factor. So keep it on the back burner and just make sure, again, on that non-negotiable list, you have it set of what you want and what you don't want and how much you're willing to spend. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the program.
Hillary.
So when you're, yeah.
We have a few hands raised. I'm not sure if there are questions, but if you've raised your hand and you have a question, if you would type it into the panel, that would be great. And we do have some questions now, but I think we can probably hold them until the end of the presentation.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So going back to the program, when you're choosing a program, you need to consider the reputation of the program you're hoping to be admitted into. But reputation is not always reflective of the rank. So rankings change from year to year and from resource to resource, depending upon where you're looking. And a school may have one fabulous program, but it's not ranked because all of the other programs aren't fabulous. So when you're looking at rankings, don't be freaked out if your school isn't on the top 100 or on the Princeton Review or something like that, because that doesn't mean it's not a good school, and it doesn't mean it's not a great program that's going to give you what you need. So keep that in mind, especially when you're getting ready to really narrow down what you are looking for within a program. So when you're picking a program, you should look to see who the faculty are within the program. If it's not listed on their website, that's a red flag. If a program is very reputable and they have great faculty, you need to make sure that they are listed and that you have access to know who those faculty members are. And then from that, are they published? Are they notable within the field that you're looking to get into? What experiences do they have that are relative to your degree? Also, in addition to the faculty, look to see what some past alumni are doing and even some recent alumni. What are they doing? Have they been successful in finding jobs and career paths after completing this program? And did they feel prepared? I'm sorry, hang on, I'm going to put my dog inside. He's barking. Sorry, brief intermission. He's put in, sorry. So really looking at the past alumni as well as are going to be really important. So did they feel prepared when they were graduating? Were they able to find and be successful at finding jobs and career paths after completing this particular program? So don't be afraid to ask them those questions. A great way to preface that would be asking somebody if you can do an informational interview with them. You can do the same thing with your faculty members as well. They should be an open book with you. So you can absolutely, like I said, absolutely schedule some time with some faculty and alumni and ask about their experience. And don't be afraid to lay it out on the table. Keep it professional, but make sure that you get your questions and your answers, or make sure that you get your questions asked. You can, I'm sorry, it just says connection lost again. Can everybody still hear me? Raise your hand. Okay, it looks like connection wasn't lost. I'm sorry, guys. So going back to the faculty members, if faculty members or alumni aren't really willing to schedule time to meet with you, answer questions, talk on the phone, whatever it may be, that speaks to the quality of the program. So keep that in mind as well. These are all resources for you and they should all be available. They are trying very hard in order to recruit solid and reputable individuals into their program. So if you're not getting that give and take relationship from them, it's definitely a red flag. Programs should also have a program coordinator, and this is really going to be your go-to person when you have questions. So she and he will be able to assist you and really get you pointed in the right direction. And they can put you into contact with just about anybody you're hoping to talk to. They have the records of the recent alumna. They have the contact information for faculty members should it not be listed online. So that's going to be an important resource for you. And if your program doesn't have a coordinator, ask the whole department itself. So if you're looking at a graduate degree in the Department of Education, call the dean and say, who helps create these course schedules and staff classes and accepts new students? Who is that person? Because then that's going to be your main point of contact. Communication from your program really should be consistent and efficient. Too much communication can be overbearing, especially during the recruiting phase. But too little can also be an indicator of the type of communication you'll get once you're in the program. And that's also personal preference. So maybe you are a person that would like 3 emails a day.
Hillary, I can't, I'm not able to hear you. I'm not sure if anyone else can hear you. It looks like other people can't hear you. I think we may have lost you.
I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me again?
I can hear you. I'm checking the questions now.
Okay, they're raising their hand. I don't understand what's going on over here because I keep losing connection. So I am very, very sorry, everybody. I apologize. I'm going to keep going just so that if I lose it again, we aren't interrupted yet again. So
Um,
again, when evaluating,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Your slides are not showing. So can you pull that back up?
possibly. Okay, can you see them now?
I just see the title, the choosing a graduate school in 5 easy steps.
Okay. Now can you see it?
No. Okay, now it's coming up.
Okay, so you see program?
Yes. And if you put it in the presentation mode, that would be good. I think we're good.
Yeah, I am in the presentation mode.
Okay. Because it's just showing, actually, we're back on timeline. So it's almost like a
What?
screen. Yeah, it's like a screenshot or something.
Okay, hang on.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah, we see the first page.
You don't see any of the things like location or cost just flipped up?
No.
Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, you see it
Correct.
now?
Yes.
This is so weird. It's acting so funky tonight. Okay, so we're on program. And like we said, faculty. So everybody sees faculty or program, correct?
Yes, I do. If people can raise their hands, we can double check. It looks like everybody.
Raise your hand if you see program. Perfect. Okay. So also when evaluating a program, look at the length of the program. If you're wanting a 12-month program, something that's 3 years is not going to work. You should really evaluate if the program is going to allow you to continue to work and be a part-time student, or if you need to be a full-time student. So those are really important things to consider when you're choosing a graduate program. You also want to see what the program's culture is. So is this a program where you're going to take classes traditionally during what would be summer term? Or are you going to be expected to do an internship? Are you expected to do a practicum? Do you have that semester off? So those are all things that you're going to want to consider. Also, consider the class sizes. Are you looking for a class that's going to be small and intimate, or are you okay with being in a lecture hall? Those are going to be important things when choosing a program as well. You'll also want to evaluate the type of program that it is. So if you're looking for a program that's theory-based, going to one that's practical-based or research-based is not going to be the right fit. So this may not necessarily be a factor for everybody, but it's something to entertain for certain programs, so keep it in the back of your mind. You'll also want to take a look at the mission and the mission of the program as well as the focus of the program. Where is the program trying to head, and what are the program's goals? So those are going to be important things when choosing your graduate school, and if that isn't information for you to begin with, that's alarming. So make sure that you ask that, and it may not be something that's published, but that program coordinator or faculty and staff should know the answers to that. Lastly, look at the placement and the graduation rates of that program. How many recent graduates have gotten jobs in their field? They haven't had to compromise. They haven't had to do anything that they haven't wanted to do. So how many of them were able to get jobs? And then on the flip side, how many were unable to get jobs? If it's a 99% placement rate, we're doing pretty well. If it's a 40% placement rate, that's something to raise a red flag. And then how many of them didn't actually graduate? So how many started the program and may have been in your cohort 2 years ago, but never completed the process? So looking at retention and graduation is going to be huge. This piece right here, the program, is probably the biggest piece when picking a graduate school. You want to make sure that your program is going to prepare you for your future career. Huge investment, like we talked about. You could very possibly be out of your comfort zone, and it's all going to be well worth it if your program is going to prepare you. But if it's not going to, then it's going to not meet your needs, and it's not going to prepare you, and you're not going to get out of graduate school what you hope to get. So while all 5 steps that I've talked about are important, program, I would say, is the most important. Next, we're going to talk about the culture. So culture is a big decision to consider when choosing a school as well. So really identifying what the campus culture is like. So what is it like being on that campus every single day? What are the students on that campus like? Is it a remote campus? And is it a campus that might be populated 95% by undergraduate students? Or is it a campus that's populated heavily by graduate students? You just don't know, and you're really not going to know that until you actually visit the school. Take the time and spend the investment to go visit the school, because that's going to be important for you in understanding and recognizing what type of culture within a campus you're going to want. You also want to make sure that within your culture that you're going to have the opportunity to be social but still be an adult, because most of us are not going through the graduate school phase at 18, 19, 20 years old. We're looking at later in our 20s, maybe early 30s. We could be going back even later than that. You have no idea. So just making sure that you're understanding the social atmosphere of still being able to have a life, but understanding that you're in that adult atmosphere as well. Or on the flip side, is this not a campus that's going to be able to offer you that culture? But maybe that's what you want. So really identifying and answering those questions for you is going to be really huge. Political culture is also going to be really important. That, for some people, is not going to make their negotiable list or their non-negotiable list. It's going to be something that's just going to be out there, and if it happens, it happens. But for other people, it's going to be really important what the political culture and what the political nature of that campus is. So do your research, and you can get online and you can look to see if that county is more a red county or a blue county. And that way you can kind of decide if you're going to be more comfortable in your college environment. Also, consider the student prototype. So is it, like I said, highly undergraduate? Is it a good mix? Do students go home each weekend or do they stay? Is your campus a commuter campus? If you're going to be living there and be a full-time student, you're going to want to be able to make sure that you can have that social life as well. So having a campus where everybody goes home or where nobody's there on the weekends and you never have anything to do may not be the best fit for some people, but it may be great for other people. So recognizing what you want within the student prototype is important too. So again, culture, it's not make it or break it. You can probably live with it, and these are going to be a lot of things, if I were to have to guess, that will be on people's negotiable lists, but it's definitely important to at least consider because it's going to be making your new school a comfortable atmosphere for you. And then the last piece we're going to talk about is fit. And just like program, this is arguably one of the most important steps that you need to consider. It's extremely important, and you need to, when you're looking for a program, look to see what the school is actually like. Again, going back to a campus tour. And if you can't get there, try and do virtually. Try and have those interviews. But I'm a firm believer in you can do anything for a certain period of time. But if you're not going to be happy, then it's not going to be worth it. So really, really, really do your research on the campus fit. Knowing what type of institution it is going to be huge. Is it a large public institution? Is it a medium-sized school? Is it a private liberal arts school? Does it have a religious denomination with it? Those are things to consider. You need to know what you want when you're going in to look at the school. If you're flexible, you need to start making those pros and cons lists of each type of school and narrow down your choices from that list. Being able to determine the type of institution is going to help you immediately narrow down that list of universities to look at besides location. So as soon as you know, I don't want to be on the West Coast, but I do want to have a large public institution, anybody that's on the East Coast or Midwest or anything like that that is not hitting that large public institution is off the list. And you go from there. Next, you need to consider some opportunities that the campus will provide you. Are there opportunities for you to excel? Can you be that big fish in the little pond? Or can you be the big fish in the big pond? And what are you really looking for when it comes to being that leader on campus, being that person that is going to set you apart? Really evaluating the varying opportunities to set you apart is going to be huge. Remember that at the end of the day, every single person that you are in that program with is going to be competing for the same types of jobs. And not only are they going to be competing against you, but you're also going to be competing against all of the individuals in that same program that are at neighboring schools and all of the other schools. So every step of the way, you need to be trying to advance your career, and you need to be trying to set yourself apart. So at the end of the day, you're all going to have that sheet of paper saying, hey, I'm qualified for the job, but what is going to be the piece that's going to set you apart, that's going to get you an interview, or that's going to land you that job? That's going to be the important piece, and this is where fit is going to come into it huge. So knowing where you can set yourself apart is going to fit right into the fit of the college campus. I've said this so many times, but I'm going to continue to say it. Make sure you have made the non-negotiable list. Before you choose a school, ensure that your school checks off every single thing on that non-negotiable list. If it doesn't, the school is not the right school, and you will find another one. And then consider your undergraduate degree. What type of university did you attend? And is the future career that you're going to go into looking for varying experiences? I was planning on going into higher education. I had gone to a private liberal arts college to begin with, And I decided, I want to give myself an opportunity to have a large public institution so that I have that experience under my belt. So when an employer looks at my resume, they say she understands working in smaller class sizes with students at a private liberal arts college, but then she also understands what it's like to work at a state institution. And when I was considering internships and practicums, I took them at community colleges in order to, again, give myself that varying experience and set myself apart. So, really understanding that the school could very possibly need to be different than your undergraduate degree. And then lastly, look at the facilities on your campus. Are they up to par? They don't necessarily have to be state of the art, but are they going to get the job done without a hassle? You don't want to walk into the classroom and have your desk fall apart. You don't necessarily need a smart board, but would you like a whiteboard? Probably. Do your professors communicate utilizing online media and that type of things? Those are things to consider. If your facilities and if the technology piece of your program is not up to par, that could be something that's going to raise some red flags as well. Additionally, some student services. What is available to you? What are the resources that you have? And what resources can you utilize, especially free of cost? So those are important things to consider as well. So I've talked my ear off or your ears off for the last 40 or so minutes, and I want to give you some time to ask me questions. But before that, like I said, if you take nothing else away from this graduate school program,
Oh, I think we've lost you again.
each step does have that varying level of importance to you as a student, and it depends on what you decide is the most important when choosing a school. So however you choose to follow those steps, that's fine, but make that non-negotiable list and ensure that each of you have considered every single question that I've asked during this webinar when you are choosing, because that's going to make you the most prepared and best decision for you in the long run. And don't forget, you're really never alone. You have plenty of Kappa sisters that are willing to help, and more than likely there will be an alumna chapter or even a collegiate chapter that's close to you and that you can call family. So you always have support wherever you turn, and we will never leave you high and dry. So with that being said, are there any questions for me? I'm sure there are because I see the little thing popping up. And before we start answering questions, I am going to flip my screen just so that you see the main screen of the PowerPoint, okay?
Okay, we do have a question that goes back to the social media
Okay.
part, and also before I read it off, if you have a question, please type it in the question pane, because if you raise your hand, there's not really any way I can call on you. So if you have your hand raised and you want to ask a question, just type it into the question pane. So this question is, do we need to have a social media or Facebook account? This is the person.
No, you don't. You don't need to have a social media or Facebook account, but the important piece to remember is that if you do, it's cleaned up. It might be good that if you at least have something out there, they can find you, but that's not necessarily where I would say you should have an account. If you're going to have any sort of account, LinkedIn is the best thing you can have. That's a professional reference. It's online. It gives them a quick snippet, per se, of what your resume is like, and it gives other employers and past colleagues that you've worked with opportunities to write reviews for you. So professional schools will oftentimes look those up, and that'll be a really good resource for them, especially if your LinkedIn is well taken care of. But no, you do not have to have any social media if you do not want to have social media.
Um, and then there's a question about visiting schools or campuses, and that you said it was important, but it's for people who are out of state, it can be very costly. This person says, I'm only applying to out of state schools. Do you have any suggestions on how to visit affordably? And maybe a website you are just able to, from which you can just see the campus.
Yeah, so a lot of times, especially larger schools, are they potentially will have virtual tours. And you can get on their website and you can find the virtual campus tour and take the campus tour as if you were there in person. The downside of that is not being able to see what that culture and that fit and that piece of the puzzle will be, but you can still make up for those things. Have the informational interviews, talk to multiple people within admissions, see if there are recent alumna that are maybe in your area that you can sit down and go have coffee with. Those are going to be things that the school will be able to help you with. So those are some important pieces. The other thing to remember is if you are going to if you are out of state and maybe some of your schools are closer together, try and make one big trip out of it. And if you have to fly there, okay. And then take public transportation from school to school to school. You may have some opportunities there, but this is where it comes down to the most schools you should ever possibly be visiting schools. And if you know that a school is going to be your safety school, maybe you don't go visit those schools, or you just go visit one of them and you visit one in your middle tier. So those are some options. I don't think you would need to visit all five, but you can make an educated decision from there. You also can wait to visit schools until after you get accepted. So dependent upon if you get accepted or not, then you can decide if you're going to go visit, because you don't want to waste all that money and then not get into the program or not get accepted into the graduate school. And to tack on top of that, if you are applying for an assistantship or any type of program where you're going to be working for the school, they oftentimes will bring you for an interview either on campus or via Skype, and that might be something you can work into a interview situation. I'd love to come see the campus. Would you be willing to cover my cost? Would you be willing to cover my flight? Depends on the relationship you have with the campus, but especially for those that are interviewing, might be an opportunity.
Okay, and just as you were answering that question, um, I lost audio. You said five schools, right?
Yes, 5 schools.
I just want to make sure that gets in the recording. Thank you. And I don't see any other questions, so I think we've answered them all.
Okay. Well, hang on. There's a hand raised.
Okay. She's asking if um, you would recommend a GRE prep class.
Um, it depends on the type of learner you are. Sometimes, yes, that is going to be something that's going to be very helpful for you. Other times, no. Personally, I didn't take a GRE prep class. I got online and I used Kaplan, kaplan.edu. It's a great resource. You can take practice GRE tests on Kaplan, and so you actually see an old GRE. It lets you score it. It puts you in the same testing environment as you would be as if you were taking the GRE in person, and then you can kind of see where you're at with your scores. I think getting down into the GRE book, there's absolutely no problem in that. You can order them on Amazon pretty cheaply. And that's going to be something that you just work problem after problem after problem in those GREs. Oftentimes, if you're still a collegiate student, they have GRE practice or GRE preparation classes that you can add into your schedule. And if, as long as you're staying under 18 credit hours, you're already paying for it anyways, so that's not an additional cost for you. So look into those options, but if you are a learner where you learn very well when somebody's teaching it to you, might be something to consider. But if you are pretty self-sufficient with being able to teach yourself, the book and Kaplan are great resources.
Okay, I see a couple of more hands, but no questions. Oh, let's see. We have a request that you go back to your original slide with the 5 basic points.
Okay. Can you see my screen as it is right now?
Yes.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Okay, so the 5 keys to choosing graduate school should be up. Can everybody see it?
It looks like everyone can see it.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions? Raise your hand if you have one that you're still hoping to type out.
I'm I'm seeing a question from Jillian, but it's not showing up. Oh, here we go. Um, she wants to know if it's bad to apply for a school, get in, and then decide not to apply for any other schools if you like your
No,
school.
no, that's okay. I mean, I think it depends on what you are wanting to do. But no, if that's what you're comfortable with, and if it hits your everything on your non-negotiable list, then absolutely, that's 100% fine to do. It's also okay to defer acceptance. So maybe you aren't willing to say yes right now. And okay, so we're talking fall of 2015, we're going to start the research process. We're going to apply in fall of 2016 to ultimately start in fall of 2017. Well, all of a sudden, fall of 2016, you're not sure anymore, or the schools that you applied to maybe weren't the best schools, and you're now just thinking that. That's okay. If you get into those schools, pick one, and you can ask them to defer your acceptance for a year. And you then have an opportunity to apply to that other school that you were potentially interested in going to. And should you like that school better, you can always cordially email that graduate program that you had previously deferred your acceptance and just let them know that you're not planning on attending for the future years. All it does is save you a spot in the next class. So that's also an option, especially if you're trying to decide whether or not you're ready or you're trying to make the leap but just aren't sure. So that's an okay opportunity and an okay thing to do as well.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to get cut off here in 2 minutes, so I think that's the last question we're going to take. But I will let Andrea close it out. But thank you very much again for joining me on this graduate school webinar. I've definitely enjoyed it, and I'm so sorry again for all the technological issues that we've had.
Well, thanks, Hillary, for leading the session, and thanks for everyone who participated today. If you have questions or comments about today's topic, you may email the presenter directly. If you would like to be more involved in CAPA's virtual training and webinar programs, we would love to have you join our producer team. Please contact the Education Department at Kappa Kappa Gamma headquarters for details. The benefits are excellent, the opportunity to support CAPA's webinar program, and a front row seat at great presentations. As we close the webinar, a survey will open on your screen. You will be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on today's webinar. Your feedback will help us shape future webinar training events. If you have any additional questions or comments whatsoever, please send an email to education@kkg.org. And thanks to everyone for their patience. We have a few glitches here, but that's why we have producers in these webinars. Have a good evening.
Bye, everybody. I did put my email in the chat, so if you would like it, you can go ahead and grab it from there. Have a great night.